discovery that they can say to the very particular interested readership, whether that's in a city, in a rural area, whether it's young people or old people, teachers, or enthusiasts, that we just published a new book, it's just for you, go get it, at Amazon or wherever you prefer. I think they're catching up. Some publishers have been very effective and others are struggling, and I think there's probably going to be more consolidation in the US market as everything starts to more to be sorted.
I think self-publishers are among the publishers who are struggling in that respect, because what self-publishers don't have is a marketing team, and how do they get their books out there and noticed? And I think it's one of the issues that they have to juggle with when choosing to self-publish or go to a publisher. Because marketing can be very narrowly focused. I'm told by my marketing colleagues in the EC Press that now on Facebook it's possible to very, very specifically target a particular group, an interest group for a new book. So if you've got a narrowly focused book, you can very quickly identify with the demographic tools on Facebook how to get the announcement out to that group of people. Never mind everybody else on the whole Facebook thing. So that you're able to do. We use a website, we announce all our books on the website, we have a catalogue and so on, but apparently the message gets through more through Facebook now and Twitter even than our website. Twitter, you can, of course, you're limited in characters, so there's a constriction on how much message you can put across on that kind of thing. But with Facebook, it's all there, and it can be, as I say, very particularly targeted. And I just want to make one small sort of slight divergence that what all the social media, websites and Facebook and everything, the effect they've had on the design of book covers, and something that perhaps people don't think about. Publishers always put a lot of effort into designing book covers. You have to have basic elements on there. You've got to have the title of the book, you've got to have the author's name, perhaps a translator's name or an editor or other credits and so on, and something which will grab attention. Now, that's fine, you do it in a certain way when it's a physical book that's going to be on a bookshelf in a bookstore. But when it's going to be a thumbnail that big on a screen, possibly that big, in somebody's hand or on a computer screen or an iPad, you've got to rethink the impact of your cover design. So you have to, it has to be sort of reduced to a much stronger impact. You've got to have bigger type than you might have had before. You've got to have perhaps a simpler, less complex image or set of images than you might have had. You've got to, if it's a well-known author, you've really got to make that author name stand out. Thinking in thumbnail terms is a big design issue these days.
And of course the cover is one part of the metadata
Yes.
phrase that we use of information about a book that will be disseminated through the different retailers and everywhere else. And that must be something key for self-published authors, how to manage their own metadata. And for publishers, of course, Jane.
Are you asking for authors or publishers? Or both?
Authors first.
So I think this is an area where authors really struggle to get it right, to pick their categories and to pick their keywords, because if you've worked in publishing for a long time, you have kind of a more innate, intuitive understanding of how things get shelved and categorized, and at least in traditional book-selling terms. And so if you're an author who's never before published, these categories might not seem entirely natural to you. And so there has to be this really market research done to figure out what's the most appropriate way to categorize your book. I think where authors sometimes have a slight advantage over publishers is that if they really understand their reader, then they know how the readers talk about their books, or they know how they talk about similar books in the market. And so they're able to choose keywords that will resonate and pull their book up in relevant searches. So that's the point of the keyword search, is to talk like the reader, so that when someone goes to Amazon or to Google or to some other search window, that when they type in, cozy mystery set in Northern Ireland, that you've chosen keywords that capitalize on people searching just for that thing.
And the publisher's been doing this for a long time, but I'm having to be ever more detailed and more careful in the metadata description.
Theoretically. Publishers, I think they tend to do their categories well at this point. Although I remember this was around, I think 2012 maybe, I was sitting in on a session run by one of the major book industry agencies. This was in Canada, I think it was BookNet Canada. And they said that still, at that point, too many publishers were categorizing their books as general fiction, which is a recipe for no sales. Because it doesn't say anything about the genre or the category or anything that would target it to a very particular reader. I don't think that happens that much anymore, but some publishers are more disciplined than others. And certainly there's, at most publishers in the US today, there's training for editors on how to title chapters, how to write the descriptions, how to choose keywords, because theoretically, the editors know best exactly what's in the book and how to express that in a way that will resonate with the readership.
You're absolutely right. Sorry, if we could just add the question of labeling and categorizing is one I think that, because I come from an editorial background, we tend to resist, and our marketing colleagues are pushing us to be more clear about this. The number of discussions we've had in publishing meetings where we editors are sitting there saying, yeah, but this is a great book. And marketers are saying, yes, but what is it? Where will it be in a bookshelf? In a bookstore, which shelf will it go on? And we say, yeah, it doesn't matter, it's a great book, it does this and this and this. No, and they want us to focus and really be very clear. And if we fail to define it for our marketing colleagues clearly enough, they'll say, well, that's it, we can't sell it. And very often we decline a book proposal because it's not clear how we're going to sell it.
That's very true. And so one of this is looking at what readers want. And the key, obviously, in publishing has always been supply for the reader, for what we now often term the consumer. And the publishers are looking at different ways of finding their readers, but also different ways of supplying exactly what they want. In terms of, do they want whole books? Do they want chapters? Do they want the smaller chunks? Jane, what's your experience of what readers are actually looking for now in terms of content consumption?
Well, there's so much variation depending on what category we're talking about. And I feel like the studies change every year and what's revealed. What we've seen recently in fiction in the US is that people favor longer books, they favor series, which isn't necessarily serials, but like a series of books that has, book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So like some very popular series, Harry Potter, for instance, or Divergent, The Hunger Games. People love this continuing story that unfolds. So I think that has been a really huge emphasis. And there's also success with serials, as you can see on Wattpad and similar apps. But that feels more prevalent in Asia, in China in particular, than in the United States. There is a company that's based in Europe, Jelly Books, that's doing some of the most fascinating research into reader analytics. So what happens is the publishers go to Jelly Books with some books that have yet to release, and they do reader testing digitally. So they get readers to read these books on their Kindles or their iPads, and they track them to see how often they'll finish the book, how quickly they finish the book, the exact moment where they stop. And then they take that data back to the publisher and say, look, you've got a real problem. After chapter 2, no one's continuing. It can also tell by people's reading behavior how likely they are to recommend it. And they've found that this is greatly influenced by the ending of the book, like how satisfying it is, and also by the cover. Because the cover ties into readers' identities. Like if they like this particular book that looks a certain way, they might feel more encouraged to recommend it because it says something about who they are. So that's, if Jelly Books is the company to watch. There was a New York Times piece about them last year that looked a little more closely at the research they're doing, and I think more publishers will take advantage of that. Of course, the danger there, the writers are scared that the publishers will come back to them and tell them to rewrite their books because reader feedback indicates the book won't sell. So there is that tension, but no one knows how it's going to play out yet.
I think that's really interesting bringing up the concept of data, because one of the things we do have now in this fourth industrial revolution is masses and masses of data about reading habits, about book sales, about what it's being published, where it's being published, where it's being bought. Less so in our region, where we're not tracking books in the same way as in the US and UK and the Western world. But I think this use of data is really interesting, and it's something I think that publishers are starting to try and really make use of.
Yes, I think Jane's saying is absolutely right. We certainly, I don't think we have the access to that kind of information yet in our region. At least I don't feel we have done the AUC Press. But we've traditionally anyway had with the scholarly books which we publish for the academic market, we have a reading system anyway. We have peer review before publishing, and it goes to a committee, a press publications committee. So, and that's the kind of thing where a reader will write a report and will come back and give that kind of advice, equivalent to what you were saying about fiction. The book doesn't have a good ending or whatever. In the scholarly books, they may say, well, chapter 2 is too long and discursive, cut it down, and bring a better conclusion in. You've got to write a strong introduction to this book, and that goes back to the author. So we do give the author feedback before we even will take the book on. That's in the sort of scholarly side of things. Fiction we work to some extent, but because most of our published fiction is translated from Arabic, that means it's already been published in Arabic, so it's too late in most cases to do that kind of editing and feedback. So we take the translation more or less as it is. If the author is around and if they're amenable, we may be able to massage a little and then put a notice in the front of the book that this has been partly altered with the agreement of the author. Otherwise people go back to the original and say this is wrong, this is not what it is. On the scholarly side also, in terms of parts of books, we can, the AUC Press contributes to something called UPSO, University Press Scholarship Online, which is based in, it's a conglomeration put together by mostly North American university presses, where academic content is aggregated and distributed to libraries around the world. Libraries subscribe to UPSO, and so the libraries can get access to that content. Their users can access whatever piece of that content they want, whether it's a chapter from this book or that, through this. So our part of that is called CSO, Cairo Scholarship Online, and again, when we're preparing a book for upload to CSO, we have to look very carefully at chapter titles, keywords, abstracts, and that takes quite a bit of work on our part to put that together properly so that people can search for and find what they're looking for. But it is a possible future pattern that can be developed more, is being able to make work available in shorter chunks, chapter by chapter. Whether we can directly sell individual chapters. We're trying it with one book. We've made an experiment. We're seeing how that goes with there's one book that we just published recently where we're also selling it as individual chapters as well as the whole book. That's something we'll look back on and see how successful it's been before deciding whether to take that kind of thing further. And there are ideas also about books being sold or used in some way by subscription, so that if a group of students needs to use a text for just 1 year of their university course, can they then subscribe to that book online for the 1 year of their course, and for obviously much less than they would pay to actually own the book, and then the subscription finishes. emergency access closes, and then they've moved on and they're using other materials after that. I think from the student's point of view, obviously that must be a good idea, and probably for the teachers and for university teachers as well.
I think in educational publishing, this is one aspect that maybe 10 years ago we thought would go in one entirely different direction, and perhaps that hasn't happened in terms of how digital books and ebooks will be used by students. The idea that digital could be incredibly malleable and usable and more interesting way of gaining that information, perhaps that isn't the case. Jane, do you feel that hasn't happened?
Well, this has been several years ago at Frankfurt Book Fair. I heard the CEO of Pearson speak, and Pearson is the world's largest publisher. They primarily publish educational texts and things for higher education and professions. And he said that they had to revolutionize what they did as a company because things were moving away from textbooks and into more service-oriented educational services. So not just providing a textbook, but providing an entire curriculum for a student for all 4 years at a university, for instance. Getting involved in learning management systems like Blackboard and providing something that's not just the text, but it might involve video and worksheets and testing and other technology. So that his view was that that's where the market was headed, and we do see that Pearson hasn't quite made that transition successfully because they keep losing employees and they keep losing money, so who knows what exactly is going to happen. But I know in the US in particular, the trend is not print to digital, but print to nothing. So instead of professors adopting textbooks, they're sending their students to free resources online, or they're doing without. So it raises this interesting question of what is the future of textbook publishing if no one wants to pay for the textbooks.
Yeah, we've been asked to in the past at various stages to provide parts of some of our books towards these kind of aggregators who are putting things together, like who are putting general course packs together, and they want one chapter from this book about another section of this and so on. And as long as there's some kind of income stream connected to that, we can do it, and it's another way of getting our work out there. No reason why not to
allow people to essentially create bespoke textbooks from properly scholarly texts that they can therefore use on their courses is one potential in the future. Coming back again to the data and the publishing, I think one thing that's very interesting that we haven't yet touched on is the sales figures and the contrast between ebooks and print books. I think this is absolutely key to what's happening in the publishing industry. We saw originally a huge spike in ebook increases from basically 0 10 years ago because there were no ebooks to where we are today. But I think that's not the whole picture. And Jane, I think you have something to give us on this.
Well, in the US and the UK in particular, the news right now says, look at how print is resurging, and we're having a renaissance for the independent bookstore. And to some extent, that's true, but you have to look at two additional factors. One is that the price of ebooks is extremely high in relationship to the print, and so readers are choosing print over ebook because they don't want to get pressured on the price as much, and they don't feel like an ebook is worth as much as a print book, and they're unwilling to pay anything equivalent. So that has, publishers have very deliberately made the ebook prices high in order to preserve the print market, preserve what they're good at and where some of their power lies. It's quite logical from a business perspective. So when you see the print resurgence news items, you have to keep the pricing in mind. The other piece of this is that a large part of the e-reading market is not measured. We don't have any good data on it. The main industry groups in the US and the UK can't really get their arms around what's happening on e-reading on Amazon, because Amazon does not release their figures, and also the self-publishing market, which often goes untracked because those authors aren't purchasing ISBNs, or they're not reporting their sales on an individual basis to the book industry groups. So you have this shadow or dark market that's occurring, particularly in the US. And what we have some estimates, and some believe that the self-publishing market represents 30% of the entire book market in the United States. And that if you look at, if you add that onto what's happening traditionally, what's happened is that the ebook sales haven't gone down, they've actually just shifted over to the authors, as well as to Amazon. Amazon has its own publishing arm, Amazon Publishing. They also have Kindle Unlimited, which is also available in some countries around the world, where it's this unlimited ebook subscription access to all, like, millions of titles. And so there's all of this reading that's happening through subscription services that also isn't measured. So I don't think it's true that ebooks have plateaued. Every year Amazon reports growth, but they don't say how much growth.
Well, when we first began publishing ebooks 5 years ago, we were not quite sure how to approach two things. One was pricing, and one was publication timing. Do you publish at the same time as the print edition, or do you wait a few months? So how many months? Is it 3 or is it 6? And so we played around a little with both those factors at the beginning. But what we discovered fairly quickly was we found no evidence of e-sales eating into our print sales. And this is what we were afraid of. We thought, oh, if we put the e-book out at the beginning, then nobody's going to buy the print book, or fewer people buy the print book. It had basically no effect that we could see. So we, instead of waiting 6 months, we brought publication back to being simultaneous. And with the pricing, of course, I think there may be an impression that because there's no paper or printing or shipping or warehousing involved, that ebooks should be a lot cheaper to make and therefore to sell. It's not as simple as that, and not quite as true as that, because there are upload costs. All the initial pre-press costs are the same. The cost of editing and design and layout are the same for whichever edition. And then with e-editions, you've got upload costs. They're not maybe quite as high as printing and shipping, but they're there. So we've priced all our books at the moment anyway at the same level, and we're still in an experimental stage. And if we see that this isn't working for some reason, we can change. What we've experienced, I think, is for us, as far as the publisher is concerned, the market share divided between e and print has plateaued from our point of view at around 20% e, 80% print. That's sort of general globally. For us in academic publishing, it's tighter. It's more like 15% e and 85% print. And within certain disciplines, in our case, for instance, Egyptology, where people seem to want print books more, it's as skewed as 10 to 90. Where we've sold most in ebook form is our fiction line, by far. For some reason, fiction, and it may be because obviously fiction usually at least is not illustrated, and so it's text-based, and people find it easier to deal with text-based books as ebooks. So the sales of fiction in ebooks has been the biggest selling sector of that side of things.
I think that's a very good point, that the different genres sell in different ways in the and we haven't really mentioned audiobooks, which is another increasing market. They're increasing from a very small point to come up and much more expensive to produce.
Yeah, audiobooks is something we had thought about a few years ago, and we thought, I remember thinking, and of course this was quite a few years ago when our good friend Omar Sharif was still alive. We thought, wouldn't it be nice to ask Omar Sharif to to read one of the Naguib Mahfouz novels and market that as an audio book. Wouldn't that be fantastic? We couldn't do it. I mean, not because we missed the boat, of course, because he passed away a couple of years ago, but to produce an audio book, you're paying for studio time, which is quite expensive, and it's a lot of studio time. I mean, to read a book, I don't know, 12, 20 hours, I don't know how many hours you might need, and you're paying for the actor or voice actor's time, the reader's time as well, which could be quite expensive too. So for a small publisher like us, it really is just not feasible. It would be wonderful. I wish we could. And if somebody would throw a nice chunk of funding our way and say this is specifically to get some of your fiction books into audio format, we would love to do it, I'm sure.
I think in the English-speaking, the US and the UK now, with podcasts becoming so popular, audiobooks, then that kind of consuming content by audio is definitely on the increase, and it's something to watch for the future. I would love to ask both of you, as we sort of come towards the end of the session, what you would like to see happening and changing the publishing world digitally. Your ideal digital aspiration, I suppose, for the publishing world. Neil?
Well, I'm, as you probably gathered from things I've been saying already, I'm a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to books, and I love books as objects, and I think a lot of people do too, as physical objects. There's nothing better at the end of a long publishing process that may have taken a year and a half, in some recent case 5 years before a book is actually in your hands, when you get the book, the first copy of the book from the printer, and you take it out of its cellophane wrapping, and there it is, it's a beautiful shiny thing, you smell it, and you feel it, and you touch the paper. And quite apart from, when you actually sit down and read it, and you're physically turning pages, and you can flip back, and you remember something you want to look at again, and you have a visual picture in your brain of where on the double page that piece was. Oh, it was at the top of a left-hand page, I remember. A few pages back, you start flipping. No, it was before that, it was after that. All of this is something that I don't think can be replicated yet in the e-book world. And maybe somebody will come up with some new technological development that we can't quite imagine at the moment to keep people like me satisfied and that sort of thing. The other thing I would like to see, and perhaps is more feasible, when you've read and enjoyed a good book, I think the first thing you want to do is to pass it on to your friends and say, look, I just finished, it's absolutely brilliant, you've got to read it here, take it, read it, and give it back because I need to have this copy back, or keep it because I don't need it, I've got another copy. At the moment you can't do that as far as I know with e-books. Wouldn't it be nice if you could read an e-book and share it with friends? You bought it, you downloaded it onto your Kindle or iPad. Why can't I, having bought it, also share it with friends and pass it on when they're finished? Perhaps there's some way to get into doing that kind of thing. That's what I would like to see as a reader, I'm talking about here.
Thank you. And Jane?
Well, my first wish, which it's never going to be granted, is that Amazon were more transparent about what's happening on their platform, how readers are behaving. Just imagine all of the data they must have on how people use their Kindles, what books they read, how they move from book to book. It has to be just incredible, and they're keeping it all for themselves. So if I can't have that, right now I think discovery tools for readers are very basic, very primitive. And it doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't benefit the retailer, the reader, the author, the publisher to have such bad discovery. And have it so haphazard and so dependent on getting your categories and keywords right. Of course, you want to do that well, but you want to have some confidence that when readers go to shop online, that they're going to have an experience that leads them to the right book at the right time, and I don't think that happens right now. So there are some companies and tools that are making inroads into this, but I think we're still 3, if not 5 years out from impressive discovery tools that will maybe reduce some of the burden and also some of the scamming that happens. This is a really big problem in the US and the UK of people putting up ebooks on Amazon and other sites that are not real books. And so you have all of this fraudulent activity that is subverting the discovery process for readers and ruining it for everyone. So I'd love to see, as I said, the discovery tools help us get over this hurdle that's hurting both readers and authors.
Thank you. I think this has been a fascinating discussion of where we are, where we've been and where we might be going. And we've got some time to take some questions from the floor. So would anybody have got any questions? And please, if you can have one question and if you can speak up so we can hear. There's a microphone coming.
Thank you again for the interesting discussion, and I just want to ask about something different than the readable book. Now we have more and more maybe market, I don't know, or users of audiobooks. So where are publishers now, or publishing companies now from audiobooks? And is there any data available in this regard? Thank you.
So you're asking about data on audiobooks? Yeah.
Well, you probably know more about that than me, but I think that my impression is that there's been quite a rise in audiobooks internationally. Our own experience of it being unfeasible for a small publisher like us, but the bigger publishers are doing a lot more of it. And one thing that I personally like as a reader is the idea that you can buy an ebook and this synchronized audiobook with it, so that you can read on screen, and then when you're driving in your car, it will pick up from the same point and continue reading to you in the audio, and then you can go back to the screen. That's a very nice development, and there's more of that, I think.
Acquiring knowledge habits and publishing.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the question.
You know, it will affect, the reading habits. It will not be reading, it will be listening, but at the end it is acquiring the knowledge or the information.
You said the question is, does it change how you acquire the knowledge if you're listening as opposed to reading?
Yeah, I was asking if there is any available data or information in this regard, and what will be the future?
I don't know of any studies on how reading behavior has changed because of audio, but certainly the phenomenon that Neil describes, where you're able to sync of the audio and the text and pick up reading or pick up listening where you left off, we're finding that's an extremely desirable feature. Audiobooks specifically have grown in sales in the US about 30 to 40% for the last 3 years. That's year-on-year growth, 30%. But it's still a small percentage of the overall market, probably not more than 1 to 2% of the overall market. However, some people speculate that the data is fuzzy, that the ebook decline, or so-called decline on traditional publishing, is partly because people are moving to audio. So there's also a lot of focus in the US on not just the audiobooks, but podcasting, using podcasts as a marketing tool to get people to buy into the audio, and also working with Amazon Alexa, which is the voice, I can't think of the technical term for those, but the voice-activated assistants, using those for audio entertainment, where you're actually interacting with characters in a story with Alexa. So that's the latest thing that's been happening. And clearly there has been such strong response in the market to audio storytelling that these experiments are feasible, and major publishers are looking for ways to do more of it.
Question at the back, right? We have a microphone here.
Hello, I'm Orla from the London Book Fair. Just as in the States, the audiobook market in the UK has grown 38%, so there's a lot of attention on that. Some of the good news so far is that it's attracting previously non-readers, and particularly men. So they say that the profile is like millennium man, so young men, so it can only enhance the market. And my other comment, not a question, is that we're launching an audiobook conference at the London Book Fair, and we're commissioning some research on audiobooks. So I'll just say that we're working with Nielsen, so that will be next spring.
Thank you. And I think we have a question at the front here.
Hello, my name is Karen Osman. I'm an author, and I would love to know what you think the next sort of major trend in genre is in fiction. I think at the moment we're very much into, Gone Girl, and that type of fiction is very strong, but also now very competitive, very saturated. Do you have any predictions for what kind of genre is going to be next?
I don't have any genre predictions, although in the United States, young adult continues to show growth, and there's also been additional interest in middle grade specifically, so that would be the age just before young adult. Adult fiction has been slightly declining for the last few years across the board, with more sales in nonfiction. One trend that's been disturbing is that Frontlist, the new titles that publishers are releasing, is declining in sales year on year. And the backlist, fortunately, is making up for that, but it indicates that discovery is maybe not as good, or the pricing isn't where it should be. I think this is traditional publishers' Achilles heel, is that they're not pricing debut authors in such a way to encourage people to take a risk. And they're pretty bad at dynamic pricing in general, meaning that they will price high when interest is high and price low when they're trying to generate demand. So I think I don't have much insight on what's going to be the next specific genre category trend, but I think pricing is one area that's very genre specific and that publishers need to catch up on in order to get debut authors noticed in a way they're not being today.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question.
Just behind.
I am Sonia, published writer, editor, as well as a filmmaker. I'm just wondering about how augmented reality is playing out in this region in specific, because I'm seeing a lot of augmented. All the book publishers I work with are now asking to kind of use AR, we've done in our film work, as well into our print work. And I'm wondering what the situation is in the other part of the world. We're very much into AR here. Even Al Jazeera was the first to start with it. Now we see even smaller publications asking us to kind of use our AR. They're calling themselves Tra Digital Magazines, which is traditional and digital magazines. They're using AR and print together to create a whole new experience.
So using augmented reality digitally on print?
On print. This goes from daily print to books to almost everything.
Do I have any input on that?
Jane, do you have anything on augmented reality in publishing?
Augmented reality and publishing. I haven't, the only experiments I've seen relate to children's literature. So, being able to read a story with your child and use your phone or an iPad in order to make the story come alive. So I have seen some successful experiments in that vein, but I haven't seen anything really that's taken off for adults. I mean, very broadly, the whole enhanced digital literature trend has petered out because traditional publishers weren't able to gain any traction on sales. So there have also been some startups that have done some interesting things with mobile literature, app-driven types of reading that would include interactive elements. There was one called, it was something like Silent Generation. And it was actually a fabulous experiment where you could go to a certain place and read installments of the story. You had to be at a specific geographic point in order to unlock the story. And it was really well done. But they made no money. They couldn't get people to buy it. So maybe its time hasn't come yet. There's just no one has been able to profit on it yet. So the experiment's time.
And I think that's a really timely reminder that the publishing industry is also about, it's a business. So we have these tools, we have these techniques, we have wonderful authors, writers, readers. We also need to be sure that this is a profitable business and that in every case this is moving forward with growth, and we can use the technology we are gaining and using here to improve our growth and improve the business as it is. We're out of time. I would like to thank Jane and Neil for an absolutely fascinating discussion of publishing in the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you very much for being with us today. We really appreciate you coming this way. I'd like to thank the audience for coming, listening and asking some really interesting questions. Our translators at the back, thank you very much. And the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation for hosting us here today. So thank you all very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. And it's been a really enjoyable discussion.
Thank you, Flora.
Thank you.